I raised 3 children for 15 years before discovering none of them were mine. That confession probably makes you think I'm some bitter man looking for sympathy. But let me pull back the curtain and show you what my life looked like before everything shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Every morning started the same way, 6 a.m. alarm cutting through the darkness like a blade. I'd slip out of bed carefully, trying not to wake Linda, and pad downstairs to make coffee. The ritual was sacred. 2 scoops of Colombian dark roast, splash of cream, no sugar. By 6:15, I was backing my truck out of the driveway, heading to whatever construction site needed my supervision that day. I loved my work. There's something honest about construction. You can see what you've built at the end of each day, measure progress in concrete and steel. Problems have solutions. Plans become reality. If only marriage worked the same way, coming home was the best part. I'd pull into our driveway around 5:30, muscles aching from a day of walking job sites and solving problems. But my heart would lift seeing our house, the 4-bedroom colonial we'd bought when Madison was born. White picket fence, red front door, Linda's flower garden blooming along the walkway. It looked like something from a magazine about American dreams. Linda would be waiting with dinner, our established routine playing out like choreography we'd perfected over 15 years. She'd kiss my cheek, ask about my day, tell me about hers while I washed the construction dust from my hands. The organized chaos of 3 kids would swirl around us, homework spread across the kitchen table, sports equipment scattered by the door, the television playing cartoons or whatever show had captured their attention that week. Kyle was 14 then, teetering on the edge between boyhood and becoming a young man. He had Linda's bright green eyes and what I thought was my stubborn streak. Weekends, he'd help me with home repairs, holding tools and asking endless questions about how things worked. "Dad, why do you use a level for everything?" He'd ask one Saturday morning while I hung new shelves in the garage. Because in construction, like life, everything has to be straight and true, or the whole structure will eventually collapse, I'd explain, not knowing how prophetic those words would become. Madison was 11 years old and my little artist, always showing me her drawings, elaborate scenes of dragons and castles, portraits of our family where everyone had enormous smiles. She'd tape them to the refrigerator with ceremony, explaining every detail like a museum curator. "This is you, Daddy, and you're wearing your hard hat because you build important things," she'd say, pointing to her latest creation. Her drawings always made our family look perfect, complete, unbreakable. Then there was Emma, 7 years old and pure sunshine distilled into a tiny human being. She still believed I could fix anything that was broken, still young enough to climb into my lap for bedtime stories without feeling embarrassed. "Tell me about the princess who wasn't afraid of dragons," she'd demand each night. And I'd spin tales about brave princesses who saved kingdoms while she fell asleep against my chest, smelling like strawberry shampoo and innocence. Looking back, I can see our marriage with painful clarity. 15 years mostly happy, or what I thought was happy. We'd had the normal ups and downs that every couple faces. Financial stress when I was starting my contracting business, sleepless nights with newborns, the inevitable arguments about whose turn it was to handle school pickup or grocery shopping. But we'd weathered everything together, or so I believed. Linda had given up her career as a dental hygienist to raise our children. It was her choice, she said, and I supported it completely. I worked overtime, took on extra projects, built my business from nothing because I wanted her to never worry about money. She handled the finances, managed the household, kept our family running while I focused on providing. Division of labor, mutual respect, partnership, all the things marriage counselors say make relationships work. The mundane intimacy of long marriage surrounded us like background music. I knew her coffee order by heart, medium vanilla latte, extra shot, oat milk. She hummed while folding laundry, always the same melody from some song she'd loved in college. We had inside jokes that wouldn't make sense to anyone else, the way she'd say construction season whenever I got obsessed with a home improvement project, or how I'd call her boss lady when she was organizing everyone's schedules. I felt grateful, blessed even. While marriages around us crumbled, My brother Mike was on his second divorce. Linda's sister Rebecca was perpetually single and bitter about it. Our family felt solid. We went to Kyle's baseball games together, attended Madison's art shows, celebrated Emma's kindergarten graduation. We looked like success. We looked like people who'd figured out how to make it work. There were small details that I included in my memory without emphasis. The way you notice wallpaper without really seeing the pattern. Linda's phone was always face down on the kitchen counter, which seemed normal. Who wants to be interrupted during family dinner? She took occasional weekend girls' trips to the city with Rebecca or college friends, returning refreshed and affectionate. Sometimes she seemed distant after we made love, staring at the ceiling with an expression I couldn't read. But 15 years of marriage teaches you that moods are temporary, that intimacy has its rhythms. These things were just the texture of married life, I thought. Every relationship has its small mysteries, its private spaces. I trusted Linda completely. Trust was the foundation everything else was built on, and I'd never had a reason to question it. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. The alarm at 6 a.m., coffee ritual, quiet house with everyone still sleeping. I kissed Linda goodbye, her hair spread across the pillow, and whispered that I'd be at the Riverside construction site all day. Big commercial project, concrete per scheduled. The kind of day that required my complete attention. I reminded Kyle about his bike helmet when he stumbled into the kitchen for breakfast, half awake and grabbing a granola bar. "Helmet, kiddo." "Every time," I told him. He rolled his eyes but nodded. "Yeah, Dad, I know," he replied groggily. We'd had this conversation 100 times. Madison and Emma were still getting ready upstairs, and I called up to them. "Listen to your mother today, okay? Love you both. Love you too, Daddy." Emma's voice drifted down, cheerful and bright. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. My phone was in my pocket, silent and unaware that in a few hours it would ring with the call that would destroy my world. I backed out of the driveway, waved at Linda through the bedroom window, and drove toward what I thought was just another ordinary day. I had no idea that would be the last morning I'd ever trust my wife. By that afternoon, biology would expose what 15 years of lies had hidden. The phone rang at 2:47 p.m. I was hunched over blueprints in the construction trailer, red pen in hand, marking corrections on the electrical layout when I saw Mercy General Hospital flash across my screen. My stomach dropped before I even answered, the way it does when you know something terrible is about to reshape your life. "Mr. Brennan?" The nurse's voice was professionally calm, trained to deliver bad news without causing panic. "This is Mercy General. Your son Kyle was involved in an accident." I was already standing, already reaching for my keys. "How bad?" I asked. "He was hit by a car while riding his bicycle near Roosevelt Middle School," she explained. "He's stable, conscious, but he needs an immediate blood transfusion." "Can you get here quickly?" I was sprinting to my truck before she finished talking. The 20-minute drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights, run and speed limits ignored. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios while my heart hammered against my ribs. Kyle, my firstborn. The boy who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, who'd helped me build a treehouse last summer, who was just starting to tower over his mother and ask shy questions about girls. Please let him be okay. Please let him be okay. The emergency room hit me like a physical assault. Fluorescent lights too bright, antiseptic smell burning my nostrils, controlled chaos of medical professionals moving with urgent purpose. I spotted Linda immediately, collapsed in a plastic chair by the intake desk, mascara streaked down her pale cheeks. "Linda," I called, and she looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Oh God, Thomas, I'm so glad you're here," she said, standing and falling against me, trembling. He was riding to Kevin's house after school. The car came out of nowhere. They said he needs blood, and they need it soon. I held her briefly, then pulled back. "Where is he?" I asked. "Room 7. Dr. Okafor is with him," she replied. I found my son propped up in a hospital bed that made him look impossibly young and vulnerable. His left leg was grotesquely angled, clearly broken, and his face was pale as paper except for the angry road rash across his left cheek. But his eyes were open, and he managed a weak smile when he saw me. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. "Hey there, tough guy," I replied, moving to his bedside, careful not to jostle the IV lines. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a car," he answered, attempting our usual banter despite the pain medication making his words slightly slurred. Dr. Raymond Okafor entered then, a tall, serious man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and got straight to business. "Kyle has a compound fracture of the tibia and significant blood loss from internal bleeding," he explained. "We've stabilized him, but he needs a transfusion within the hour. Are you willing to donate?" "Whatever he needs," I answered without hesitation. "Take it all if you have to." Dr. Okafor smiled. "We won't need everything. Just roll up your sleeve," he said. The nurse drew my blood with practiced efficiency. I sat in the uncomfortable chair watching the dark red flow into the collection bag, thinking about all the times Kyle had scraped his knees and I'd cleaned his cuts. Blood was blood. Family taking care of family. The most natural thing in the world. 10 minutes passed. Dr. Okafor returned, and something in his expression made my chest tighten. His professional demeanor had shifted, become more careful, like he was navigating a minefield. "Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan, could I speak with you privately?" he asked. We followed him to a small consultation room. Linda's hand found mine automatically, the way it had during every crisis we'd faced together. Dr. Okafor sat across from us, his words careful and clinical. "I need to share something unexpected about the blood work," he began. "Kyle's blood type is AB positive." He paused, looking directly at me. "Mr. Brennan, your blood type is O positive. That genetic combination is impossible. An O positive father cannot have an AB positive child." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. "Kyle cannot be your biological son," he said quietly. The room tilted. Linda's hand went limp in mine, and when I turned to look at her, I watched the color drain from her face in real time. Her green eyes were wide, terrified, and in that instant, that terrible world-ending instant, I understood that she knew. She'd always known. "There has to be a mistake," I heard myself saying, my voice sounding far away. "Hospital mix-up." "Clerical error." "Test contamination." I was grasping for logical explanations while my foundation crumbled beneath me. Dr. Okafor was sympathetic but firm. "I ran the test twice, Mr. Brennan. The results are definitive." "I'm very sorry," he said. I looked at Kyle through the consultation room window. My son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, whose first word was Dada, who had my mannerisms and gestures but not, apparently, my blood. 14 years of fatherhood suddenly cast in a different light. Linda was stammering beside me, her voice high and desperate. "This has to be wrong. Maybe there was paperwork mixed up when he was born. Hospitals make mistakes all the time," she said. I forced myself to nod, to play along, to act like this was just a medical mystery we'd solve later. But my mind was already racing, already calculating, already knowing that one impossible blood type meant everything I'd believed for 15 years might be built on lies. "We'll use blood from our bank for Kyle's transfusion," Dr. Okafor said gently. "He'll be fine. This doesn't affect his treatment at all." Kyle's procedure went smoothly. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand, stroking his hair, whispering that everything would be okay, while my world exploded in slow motion. He fell asleep from the anesthetic with his hand in mine, trusting and peaceful, unaware that his paternity had just become a question mark. Linda tried to talk to me in the hallway. "Thomas, we need to discuss," she began. "Not now," I interrupted, my voice cold, controlled. "Kyle needs us." "We'll deal with this later." But later was already here, wasn't it? Later was sitting in my chest like a tumor, growing larger every second. I spent the evening mechanically going through the motions, talking to Kyle's doctors, calling our parents with updates, arranging for someone to cover my job site tomorrow. Normal husband and father behavior while my brain worked like a computer, processing possibilities I didn't want to consider. That night, I lay rigid beside Linda in our bed. She was pretending to sleep. I could tell by her breathing, too controlled, too careful. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. What were the odds of a hospital error? Could Kyle have been switched at birth? But no, Kyle looked exactly like Linda's father, had her green eyes, her stubborn chin. The genetics worked perfectly on her side. The problem was my side. The problem was that Kyle might not be mine at all. And if Kyle wasn't mine, what about Madison? What about Emma? At 3 a.m., unable to bear another second of uncertainty, I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible. Linda didn't stir. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter and drove through empty streets to the 24-hour pharmacy on Elm Street. I bought 3 paternity test kits that night, my hands shaking as I placed them on the counter. The teenage cashier looked bored, probably assumed I was buying them for someone else's drama. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the hospital was wrong, that there had to be an explanation that didn't destroy everything. But somewhere deep down, I already knew the truth. And I knew it was worse than just Kyle. The 2 weeks waiting for results were psychological torture disguised as normal life. I became a master of performance art, playing the role of loving husband and devoted father while my soul rotted from the inside out. Every morning, I woke at 6 a.m., made coffee, kissed Linda goodbye, and drove to work. Every evening I came home, helped with homework, ate dinner, watched television, and went to bed beside the woman who might have been lying to me for our entire marriage. But underneath the routine, I was conducting an investigation with the methodical patience of a man who builds skyscrapers for a living. I collected DNA samples from my children with calculated casualness that would have impressed a forensics expert. Madison spilled orange juice on her school uniform one morning, and I dabbed her mouth with a napkin, slipping the napkin into a plastic bag when she wasn't looking. "Daddy's just cleaning up," I said when she looked at me curiously, my voice steady while my heart hammered. Emma had a loose tooth that she kept wiggling obsessively. I offered to check it with a cotton swab, gently scraping the inside of her cheek. "Just making sure it's ready to come out, sweetheart," I explained. She giggled and bounced away, completely trusting. The cotton swab went into another bag, labeled and stored in my truck's glove. Compartment Kyle's sample was already handled. I'd kept the hospital's blood work, information, and obtained an additional sample when I brought him lunch. During his recovery. "Just want to make sure." "You're healing properly, buddy," I told him. He was too grateful for the attention to question why I needed a cheek swab. I sent everything to 3 different testing companies because I needed to be absolutely certain before my world officially ended. No room for error. No possibility of lab contamination or mix-ups. If I was going to destroy my family, I needed irrefutable proof. Linda was watching me during those 2 weeks. She knew something was wrong. Wives develop radar for their husbands' emotional states after 15 years, but she couldn't be sure how much I suspected. She asked repeatedly if I was okay, if I was upset about Kyle's accident, if something was bothering me at work. I perfected my mask, tired smile, kiss on the forehead. "Just work stress, honey." "The Riverside project is behind schedule," I'd reply, giving her nothing to grab onto, no opening for manipulation or explanation. Every conversation was surface level, polite, distant. But I caught her staring at me sometimes with this desperate, calculating expression, like she was trying to gauge whether our marriage was about to implode. She'd watch me interact with the children, studying my face for signs of suspicion or withdrawal. When I'd look back at her, she'd quickly smile and pretend she'd been doing something else. The nights were the absolute worst. I'd lie beside Linda in our king-sized bed, the same bed where we'd conceived, or where I thought we'd conceived our children, and wonder how many times she'd lied to my face. How many times she'd come home from an affair and climbed into bed with me. How many times I'd made love to her while she carried another man's child. The rage built like pressure in a sealed container, but I kept it locked down. Not yet, not until I had proof. Not until I could plan properly. I watched my children with new, horrible awareness. Kyle's nose, whose nose was that? Not mine, apparently. Madison's laugh, which I'd always thought sounded like mine, was that some stranger's genetic legacy? Emma's mathematical aptitude that seemed to come from nowhere, since neither Linda nor I were particularly good with numbers, whose intelligence had gifted her that talent. I'd memorized their faces over years of fatherhood, but now I was studying them like crime scene evidence, looking for traces of men I'd never met. The curve of Kyle's jaw. The way Madison tilted her head when she was thinking, Emma's dimples that appeared when she smiled. Which features were Linda's and which belonged to the ghosts of her betrayal. I also began documenting everything with the thoroughness of a man building a legal case. Linda's schedule, her phone usage patterns, her behavioral quirks that I'd previously attributed to normal marital rhythm. She left for book club every Thursday evening. When had that started? 2 years ago? 3? She'd joined a hiking group that met Saturday mornings. Strange, since Linda had never shown interest in hiking before. I started checking our bank statements for the first time in years. Linda handled all our finances, and I'd trusted her completely. Another mistake in a marriage apparently built on them. But I found nothing unusual. No secret credit cards, no mysterious withdrawals, no payments to hotels or gifts for unknown recipients. Whatever affairs she'd conducted, she was smart enough not to leave a paper trail. I began remembering things with new context. The weekend 2 years ago when she'd visited her sick aunt in Cleveland while I stayed home with the kids, I'd never met this aunt, and Linda had returned suspiciously refreshed for someone who'd spent 2 days in a hospital. The month she'd joined that book club, coming home with slightly smudged lipstick that she'd explained away. We stopped for drinks after discussing the novel, she'd said. The time she'd come home from grocery shopping with her hair messed up and her blouse buttoned wrong. I tried on a sweater at Target, she'd explained. The changing rooms are so cramped. I'd believed her because why wouldn't I? Suspecting your wife of infidelity while she carried your groceries into the house seemed paranoid and insulting, but now every memory was recontextualized. Every explanation seemed inadequate. Every trip, every late evening, every mood shift took on sinister possibilities. The DNA results arrived on a Friday. 3 separate envelopes in my mailbox, each one potentially containing the end of life as I'd known it. I drove to the Riverside construction site, parked in the back corner of the lot where no one could see me, and opened them with hands that shook like an earthquake victim's. Kyle, 0% probability of paternity. Madison, 0% probability of paternity. Emma, 0% probability of paternity. 3 children, 3 different biological fathers. 15 years of marriage built on lies so profound they rewrote biology itself. I sat in silence for 30 minutes. The papers scattered across my lap, staring at the dashboard of my truck while my brain tried to process the impossible. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the steering wheel or throw the papers out the window. Instead, I felt something break inside me that would never heal. Some fundamental capacity for trust, for faith in other people's goodness. But I remained absolutely still, absolutely controlled because now I knew the full truth. And now I could plan. I started my truck and drove not toward home, but toward the office building on 5th Street, where I'd seen Sharon Valdez's law practice advertised on a billboard for years. The billboard I'd passed every day without thinking I'd ever need her services. The one that promised aggressive advocacy for family law. I had the proof. All 3 children, conceived during my marriage, raised with my name, loved with my whole heart, none of them mine. Linda had destroyed 15 years of my life with calculated, methodical betrayal. Now it was time to destroy hers. Sharon Valdez's office smelled like leather and expensive coffee, with law books lining the walls and certificates displayed in polished frames. I sat across from her massive oak desk, still wearing my work clothes, and methodically laid out the DNA results like blueprints for a demolition project. She read through each report with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen humanity's worst impulses documented in legal paperwork. When she looked up, there was something almost like respect in her dark eyes. "This is paternity fraud on a devastating scale," she said, her voice carefully professional. "In this state, you have grounds for full custody, fraud damages, complete dissolution of marital assets, and 0 child support obligations for children who aren't biologically yours." I surprised her with my first response. "I want custody. They're still my kids. I raised them. I love them. I'm not punishing them for what their mother did." Sharon's expression shifted to something approaching approval. "That changes the strategy significantly. Most men in your position want to walk away from everything," she observed. "I'm not most men," I replied. She explained my legal options: divorce proceedings that would eviscerate Linda in court, potential fraud lawsuit seeking damages for 15 years of deception, immediate legal separation with me retaining the house and primary custody, financial protections that would leave Linda with minimal support and no claim to assets I'd built through my construction business. My supervisor brain applied project management, principles to the destruction of my marriage: identify objectives, allocate resources, establish timeline, execute with maximum efficiency. But the legal victory, satisfying as it would be, wasn't enough. I wanted something more primal, more complete. I want everyone to know what she did, I told Sharon. I want her parents to see their daughter's betrayal. I want my children to understand why their family is ending. I want Linda to face the consequences publicly, with nowhere to hide and no way to spin the narrative. Sharon initially advised against public confrontation. It could complicate custody proceedings if you appear vindictive, she warned. I don't care. She humiliated me privately for 15 years. She'll face justice publicly now, I answered. Together, we designed the plan. A celebration dinner for Kyle's recovery, scheduled for 2 weeks out. Invite both sets of parents, close family friends, key people from our social circle. Create an environment where Linda felt safe and surrounded by people who loved her. Then detonate the truth like a bomb in the middle of our dining room. Sharon prepared multiple copies of the DNA results in sealed envelopes, printed court documents for immediate service, arranged for Linda's bank accounts to be frozen that same evening. Every detail was weaponized for maximum impact. The shock value will prevent her from mounting an effective defense, Sharon explained. By the time she recovers enough to start damage control, the story will be everywhere. Social media, neighborhood gossip, workplace rumors. There's no coming back from this kind of public exposure. I went home that evening and suggested the celebration dinner to Linda. She loved the idea immediately, saw it as proof that our marriage had survived the blood type incident that had shaken her so badly. That's wonderful. Thomas, she said, actually hugging me spontaneously. Kyle will love having everyone together. And it'll be good for us too. Show everyone that we're stronger than ever. I hugged her back, feeling her body against mine, smelling her familiar perfume, and said nothing. She had no idea I'd already filed divorce papers. No idea that in 2 weeks her entire life would collapse in front of everyone she knew. The waiting period was different now. I wasn't paralyzed by shock anymore. I was energized by purpose. I helped Kyle with his physical therapy exercises, proud of his determination to walk without crutches before returning to school. I took Madison shopping for new art supplies, listening to her excited chatter about a painting she was working on for the school art show. I read bedtime stories to Emma and held her until she fell asleep, her small body trusting and warm against my chest. These moments were precious in a way they'd never been before. The last days before my children learned their family had been built on lies. I was memorizing their innocence because soon it would be gone forever. Linda grew visibly more relaxed as the dinner approached. She bought a new dress, planned an elaborate menu, decorated the house with care. She actually hummed while she worked, the same melody from college that she always hummed when she was truly happy. One evening, she came up behind me while I was helping Kyle with his homework and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "I'm so glad we're okay," she whispered. "For a while there, I was worried that the blood type thing might make you question everything. But you trust me, don't you? You know I'd never do anything to hurt our family." I leaned back against her, feeling her warmth, and patted her arm. "Of course I trust you," I replied. The lie came easily now. Inside, I was counting down the days until she lost everything. She had no idea that the dinner she was planning so carefully would be her public execution. No idea that the guests she was so excited to see would be witnesses to her complete destruction. No idea that the husband she thought she'd successfully deceived was about to demonstrate that 15 years of lies had consequences. The celebration dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening. By Sunday morning, Linda's life as she knew it would be over. Linda thought we were celebrating Kyle's recovery. She had no idea I was planning her execution. The guests would arrive laughing and smiling, expecting to toast a family that had weathered a crisis together. None of them knew they were about to witness a marriage's public cremation. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for early April. The dining room looked perfect. I had to admit Linda knew how to stage an event. Italian catering from Antonio's, our favorite restaurant, filled the house with garlic and basil aromas. Our best dishes gleamed on the table, tall candles created intimate lighting, and fresh flowers from Linda's garden served as centerpieces. 20 guests filled our house with laughter and conversation. Both sets of parents had driven in for the occasion. My mother and father from across town, Linda's parents from their retirement community an hour away. Linda's sister Rebecca was there with her latest boyfriend. My brother Mike with his new girlfriend Sarah. Close family friends who'd watched our children grow up. Couples we'd known since Kyle was in diapers. Kyle moved around on crutches but smiled constantly, basking in the attention. He loved being the center of celebration, loved having his grandparents fuss over him and ask detailed questions about the accident. Madison and Emma had helped set the table earlier, excited about the party, wearing their best dresses and showing off for the relatives they didn't see often enough. Linda was radiant in her new blue dress, the same shade as the one I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary. She moved through the room with graceful hostess energy, refilling wine glasses, making sure everyone had enough to eat, laughing at her father's embarrassing stories. She caught my eye across the crowded dining room and mouthed, "I love you," her face glowing with happiness. I nodded back, my expression neutral, my heart empty. Dinner was loud with overlapping conversations and family warmth. Linda's father told the story about Kyle's first haircut, how he'd screamed so loudly that other customers fled the barber shop. My mother praised Linda's parenting skills, talking about how well-adjusted and polite our children were. Everyone toasted to Kyle's recovery, to family resilience, to health and happiness. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand under the table during one of the toasts. Her fingers were warm, familiar, trusting. I didn't squeeze back. When dessert was cleared and everyone had settled into post-meal contentment, I stood and tapped my wine glass with a fork. The room gradually quieted, conversations dying as faces turned toward me expectantly. Linda smiled up at me, probably thinking I was about to give a touching speech about family strength and gratitude. Instead, I began. 2 weeks ago, Kyle had an accident. At the hospital, I tried to donate blood for his transfusion, I announced. I paused, letting the words settle. The doctor told me something interesting. My blood type makes it genetically impossible for me to be Kyle's father. The smile froze on Linda's face like a photograph. Confused silence rippled across the table. I watched my father's expression shift from relaxed contentment to sharp attention. I continued, pulling sealed envelopes from my jacket pocket. I took DNA tests for Kyle, Madison, and Emma. These are the results from 3 separate laboratories. I began distributing envelopes to each adult at the table with the mechanical efficiency of a mailman. I thought you should all see them. Linda was on her feet now, her voice rising with panic. Thomas, don't, please. We can discuss this privately, she pleaded. But I was committed now, past the point of mercy or discretion. Everyone deserves to know the truth, I stated flatly. My mother opened her envelope first. I watched her face transform from confusion to horror as she read, her hand flying to her mouth, a small, wounded sound escaping her lips. Linda's father opened his copy next, his complexion darkening to dangerous red as he processed the information. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. Other guests were opening their envelopes now, expressions shifting from bewilderment to shock to disgust. The atmosphere changed like air pressure before a tornado, heavy and electrically charged. Kyle grabbed his copy with shaking 14-year-old hands. I watched my son's face go through a terrible progression. Confusion, comprehension, devastation, rage. "Dad?" His voice cracked like it was changing all over again. "What does this mean?" I kept my voice steady, precise, merciless. "It means none of you are biologically mine. Your mother had affairs, multiple affairs during our marriage. 3 different men fathered you. She let me believe you were all my children, while she systematically betrayed our family." The words landed like artillery shells. The room erupted in chaos. Linda was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks, trying to speak over the explosion of voices. "It's not. I can explain. They might have been Thomas's. I thought," she stammered. Linda's father roared over her stammering. "Who? Who did you do this with?" His face was purple with rage, 20 years of love for his daughter transforming into fury and disgust. Linda's mother sat white-faced and mute, staring at her daughter like she was looking at a stranger. My parents were both shouting, my father demanding details, my mother asking how Linda could do this to such a good man. Rebecca was crying, repeating, "Jesus Christ, Linda," like a prayer. Madison burst into tears and ran from the room. Emma, too young to fully understand but sensing catastrophe, clung to my leg and sobbed. Kyle struggled to his feet, crutches clattering as he faced his mother with pure betrayal written across his young face. "Mom, how could you do this to Dad? How could you do this to us?" he demanded. Linda tried to explain through her sobs, words tumbling out in desperate fragments. "Different men," she said. "Mistakes during rough patches in our marriage. She'd thought the babies could be Thomas's. She'd prayed they were Thomas's. She'd never meant for anyone to get hurt. You knew they might not be his?" Linda's mother's voice was shrill with horror. "You let this man raise children that might not be his." Kyle was shouting now. "You let us believe we were a real family. You let me call him Dad for 14 years when you knew. His voice broke with the weight of betrayal. Linda reached for her son, but he jerked away violently. "Don't touch me," he snapped. I crouched down and pulled Madison, who had returned, unable to stay away despite her tears, and Emma close to me. My voice when I spoke to them was the only gentle thing in that room of chaos. "I'm your dad in every way that matters," I told them, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've raised you since you were born. I've loved you every single day of your lives. What your mother did doesn't change how I feel about you. You're my daughters, and nothing will ever change that." Madison sobbed into my shoulder. Emma pressed her face against my neck, not understanding the words but understanding the emotion. Kyle stared at us with something like wonder, like he'd been afraid I might reject him. I stood, still holding the girls, and delivered the final blow with cold finality. "I've filed for divorce. Full custody. I'm keeping the house. Linda will receive minimal support. Enough for an apartment, nothing more. She can visit if the children want to see her, but she will not live under my roof anymore." Linda's father looked at his daughter with absolute disgust. "Don't come home. I don't want you in my house. You destroyed your family. You're a disgrace. Dad!" Linda screamed, reaching for him, but he turned away. Linda tried one last desperate appeal. "The kids need their mother." Kyle's voice cut through her plea like a blade. "I need my dad. You lied to all of us. You lied for my whole life." The finality in his teenage voice, the complete rejection from the child she'd birthed, broke something visible in Linda. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, her support system evaporating around her. The other adults were leaving now, muttering shocked conversations, avoiding eye contact with Linda. My brother Mike squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Call me if you need anything." Rebecca stopped long enough to say, "I'm sorry, Thomas. I had no idea. I would have stopped her if I'd known." The dining room emptied except for immediate family. Linda's parents left without saying goodbye to their daughter. My parents stayed long enough to hug their grandchildren and promise everything would be okay. "You're still our grandbabies," my mother whispered to Madison and Emma. Nothing changes that. When the house was finally quiet, Linda sat alone at the dining table, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. Half-eaten dessert plates, abandoned wine glasses, crumpled napkins, and the scattered DNA reports that had destroyed everything. Kyle broke the silence, his voice hollow but determined. "I want to stay with Dad." Madison nodded through her tears. "Me too." Emma looked confused but stayed pressed against my side. Linda tried one more time. "Please, Thomas. We can work through this. Marriage counseling, therapy." I cut her off with brutal finality. "You built our family on lies for 15 years. I'm going to build a real family with my children now, one based on honesty and trust." "You're not part of that anymore." Linda's sobs echoed through our empty house as she realized she'd lost everything in one evening. her husband, her children, her parents' respect, her entire social network. She'd gambled with our family for 9 years and lost everything when the truth finally came. I gathered my traumatized children close and began the long process of explaining that, while their mother had betrayed everyone who loved her, I would never abandon them. They were mine in every way that mattered, and no DNA test would ever change that. Linda had lost everything in one evening. But as satisfying as her destruction was, the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding 3 shattered children who'd learned their entire family history was a lie. 18 months after I exposed my wife's betrayal, people still ask if I regret how I did it. They think publicly humiliating her was cruel. I tell them the truth. I don't regret a single second. 3 months after, Linda moved into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment working part-time retail for $12 an hour. Her parents wouldn't help financially. Her father still refused to speak to her. The divorce was swift and brutal. Linda received almost nothing. The court ruled that 15 years of systematic deception voided any claim to assets I'd built. The children refused her calls. Kyle blocked her number entirely. 6 months after, Kyle came to me wanting to know about his biological father. We searched DNA databases together, finding distant relatives but no direct match. Kyle stared at the screen, then turned to me. "You're my dad. That guy's just a sperm donor." I had to leave the room to hide my tears. Madison and Emma never asked about their biological fathers. Our house developed new rhythms. Breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table, Friday movie nights. My parents stepped up, picking up kids from school, teaching Kyle practical skills. Family was redefined by presence, not biology, 1 year after. Linda begged for contact through letters, gifts, emails. Finally, Kyle agreed to meet her for coffee with me present. She looked smaller, worn down, apologizing and making excuses. Kyle listened without sympathy. "You made choices." Big difference. The meeting ended without reconciliation. 18 months after, I met Angela, a nurse from Kyle's hospital. We dated slowly, carefully. The kids liked her. She didn't try to replace Linda, just brought warmth and honesty. Kyle approved. "She actually respects you, Dad. Family isn't DNA. It's showing up every day, choosing your children, never walking away." Linda lost everything: husband, children, parents' respect, community standing. She lives alone now, working retail, sending unanswered letters. I didn't just survive Linda's betrayal. I chose my children, and they chose me back. We built something real from the wreckage, a family based on honesty instead of lies, daily choice instead of genetic accident. That choice mattered more than any DNA test ever could. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.